The following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Go Cowboys! This is Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw Dating, preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys, and broadcasting live from Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters at the Star.
Welcome to Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw, the preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. It's us. Hi, Jess Navarez, Christy Scales, Aisha Morrison here with you on this Monday. Ladies, I wish it was a little more positive mood today to kick off our week. Unfortunately, not going to be a fun week here at the Star in Frisco. Your Dallas Cowboys falling short to the Arizona Cardinals 28-16. Christy, welcome back. I'm sure it was a long flight home, a very quiet flight, I would imagine.
Actually, they're really fast after a loss because everyone wants to get out of the locker room. Yeah. There also were storms in Dallas, so we actually landed 20 minutes early. So it's like there was a lot of incentive to get back and start to put Sunday behind everyone.
Absolutely, and we have a lot to unpack with this game, the good, the bad, the very ugly within it. So 28-16, I don't think this was a game that anybody predicted that would be the final score and the Cardinals would come out with the win, if I'm being honest. I think the word of the week is overlooked. I think a lot of people overlooked the Cardinals and Josh Dobbs and what he was able to do there. Aisha, you've had time to... Yeah, I know. You've had time to come down from it, right? Mm-hmm. And you've had time to kind of think through... Let's start there. What are the initial things that stood out to you to why the Dallas Cowboys couldn't pull off the win in this game?
Well, on the offensive side of the ball, I wanted to take into consideration, I think Tony Pollard said after the game yesterday, and Mike McCarthy kind of alluded to you, when you have 3 starting offensive linemen or 2 get hurt on a Saturday, which Christy's explained to us, just kind of how the weekly schedule plays into how a team is successful. I feel like, well, they talked about it. Like, they had to change a lot of their alignments, some of their game plan, and the red zone struggles continue, my friends. Like, that is probably my biggest takeaway from the game. They were able to move down the field. The penalties were not helpful. And on the defensive side of the ball, you listen to all the player interviews and you go look at the game. You see that they did not play assignment-based football. They did not play for their brother yesterday, and that was clear. And so that, to me, kind of sums up why the game went the way it did, and the Cardinals were prepared. They were prepared.
Yeah, they played really well.
Yeah,
Hats off to the Cardinals. A great plan.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
really utilized their guys. What went right for the Cowboys in the first 2 weeks didn't happen in week 3. No takeaways, only 2 sacks. There had been no giveaways, and then there was the one at the end where Dak was picked off in the end zone. And in the first 2 weeks, the Cowboys did not shoot themselves in the foot. It was the other team that was making the mistakes. Yesterday, with those 13 penalties, and there could have been more. There were some that were multiple penalties on the same play or were declined. So it was just a game of fits and starts. Whenever there was any kind of momentum going for the Cowboys, they would make a mistake, usually a penalty. And so it doesn't matter who your opponent is. And even though we talked about it last week, the Cardinals were 0-2, but we talked about how well their offense had played, particularly in the first half of those games, you know. Yeah, and Michael Wilson, who Aisha mentioned, you know, with a big play. And so, you can't beat – it's hard enough to beat another team without, you know, you beat yourself.
Yes.
Forget it. It doesn't matter who you play.
Yeah. Absolutely, and trust me, we're going to talk about the penalties. Christy, last season, I don't know if you remember the running joke that became of the game to take a drink anytime I mention penalties on this podcast. Well, we have 13 reasons today to take 13 drinks, so I don't have one. But
This ain't just Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. You know what? It's excused today. 13 penalties for over 100 yards. I mean, that's you're not setting yourself up to win at that point. 13 penalties for 107 yards.
And what was so frustrating, so many of them pre-snap penalties. Yeah. And what's the one thing Mike McCarthy told us a couple weeks ago, that he takes penalties and he divides them into 3 different categories. And the one category where it's being aggressive, you know, some of those where you're, you know, maybe don't pull up on, hitting a player. There are penalties of aggression, and so those are understood by coaches. But pre-snap and post-snap penalties, you just cannot have that. And it was all three phases of the game.
Man, listen.
Boy, those penalties on special teams, that holding call, wiping out the 51-yarder punt return by Cavante Turpin.
Yeah.
I know that the offense they were back at their own, 19 or 23 instead of up in Cardinals territory, and they still drove down to the 4-yard line. But still, that was a 61-yard penalty by the time you take the 51 yards on the return and then tack on the holding against Devin Harper. Just absolute killers. That place, there were so many Cowboy fans yesterday, and everyone was so excited on that play. And then, the flag, it was the correct call, happened to be right in my line of sight. I'm like, it was the correct call. Yeah, that flag came out while the punt was still in the air. Harper trying to block Gardeck, releasing off the line into coverage. So it was correct. But, man, that was a killer.
And here's the thing. I have been going back to rewatch a lot of where those penalties were drawn, right? And I think the one that's being the most talked about right now is the non-call on Michael Gallup that was actually called back for defensive pass interference, which could have gotten the Cowboys back on the board, and XYZ. That was kind of their last chance to score a touchdown with that drive. It's so interesting because obviously penalty's not called, but you can't rely on that. You can't rely on a penalty to be called to save your game. At that point, you shouldn't be in that hole to even get to that point to have to do that. And yes, I when I look back and watch it, even if I take the bias glasses off and as much as I wanted that flag to be called, they should have called it. I agree. I think so. But you also can't rely on that. And if you want to win games, 13 penalties is not going to win you a game. And interestingly enough, that actually tied with the Cowboys' most penalized game last season against the Giants in Week 12. So again, we're talking about penalties. We're talking about, lack of production in the red zone. We're talking about run defense being an issue. All the same kryptonites, if you will, that plagued the Cowboys last season. And I think that's what's more frustrating and concerning about this game is these are issues that we've sucked dry out of talking about for the Dallas Cowboys. So it was frustrating to see them take what felt like 10 steps back in this game.
Yeah, and when you talk about some of the penalties, the offensive ones were big too because, I think you had a offensive OPI against CeeDee Lamb, and you had a couple false starts from Terrence Steele. So I will say that I'm trying to be considerate of the fact that this was a new offensive line. You didn't have your normal center, and he's the one that's telling, giving all the cues and stuff. So I venture to say there probably was some communication stuff on the offensive line, but it's just it was a tough day. And to Christy's point, she mentioned the fact that every time there was some momentum, even on the defensive side, even when they would get a stop, flag, and you just like, come on, dude, like they couldn't get off the field. And the jumping off sides, I believe that Tank categorized the way that the defense was playing was that they were antsy and they were eager. Those were the words that he used, and you could see that. You could see that in their play. Just we used the word, very loosely, but they were very undisciplined yesterday.
And frustrated.
Yeah.
And that was the feeling on the sideline was frustration. And there was one point, I think it was early in the second quarter, where Al Harris, who was the defensive backs coach, came down and gathered. It was the defensive linemen sit on the far right of the bench, and then you have the linebackers, and then the defensive backs are more towards midfield. But the defensive linemen were talking. Al kind of gathered everybody up and said a little something, and then DeMar, because it wasn't hellfire and brimstone like sometimes you see. And I think that sometimes people think a lot of that happens on an NFL sideline, and it really doesn't. It's usually pretty steady Eddie on the sideline. And so there weren't all these rah-rah things happening, particularly in the second half. But when DeMarcus, and I'm glad you mentioned that word antsy, I think it's that they knew that they needed to make a play because they were the ones that were setting everything up through these first 2 weeks, right? And it's like, who's going to make the play? Who's going to make the play? Who's going to make the play? Micah had that big sack. Fans erupt. It's like, all right, here we go. We're going to turn, and then just nothing.
Real quick, just a reminder, you can text us your questions at 817-290-3298. Ladies, We got some hate mail here. It
Barnacles.
says, you all need to change your formatting just a little bit. Too much negativity, too much finger pointing. A fan since 1961, go Cowboys. Well, fans since 1961, we would be doing an incredible disservice if we sugarcoated how bad this loss really was this week.
I mean,
There's a
we
lot
haven't
to learn
gotten there.
from.
I mean, we haven't gotten there quite yet. We're going to talk about some of the positive stuff.
Yeah,
like
there
We're
were some
unraveling
positives.
this
Believe
week.
me.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, and
we wanted
thank-
to get this out of the way. Trust
Yeah,
me. We don't like talking about this on a Monday just as much as y'all don't like hearing about it.
Yeah, and thank you for watching, and thank you for the text. But there are some positives, but I mean, facts are facts.
We're not gonna cut it dry.
They got beat. They got beat in all
Period.
3 phases. And like I said, hats off to the Cardinals. Sometimes you're not the better team that day. It doesn't have to do with the talent; it's how the talent plays.
Yep.
And,
What I was what I was telling Aisha earlier before we started recording is this team was on a mountaintop, the first 2 weeks of the season with how they were playing. Obviously, yes, this is a humbling loss. Look, I would rather watch them lose to the Cardinals than watch them lose to the 49ers. Watch them lose to the Eagles, and that mess a little bit more with their playoff standing.
It's
Get
still
the
a
loss
conference
out of the
game.
way.
Yeah,
It's still a conference
important,
game,
yeah.
though. It's an NFC.
But
I get what
it
you're
lights
saying.
the fire. It lights the fire. It ignites the fire to
Sure.
remind them they don't like how this feels. They didn't like how it felt in San Francisco to lose that game during the playoffs. You don't like how this feels? Don't let it happen again.
Yeah, I'm really curious. The reason why we're on at 3 o'clock instead of our normal 4 o'clock Central Time, Monday through Thursday. Today we're on at 3 because Mike McCarthy, his press conference was moved from 2:30 Central to 4 o'clock. And I wish that we had had a chance to hear from Mike. And he'll never, they don't give a lot of details about game plan. But I will say that when we go back to the fact that 3 starters on the offensive line were missing, this isn't just, 3 starters.
Mm-hmm.
No, this was with the 3 guys
Very
who were
big
missing.
starters.
Tyler Biotish, Zach Martin, and Tyron Smith, a combined 336 career regular season starts. That doesn't include playoffs. That doesn't include all the Pro Bowls they've been in. 336 games, okay? Mm-hmm. They were standing on the sideline next to me. That ain't good. Mm-hmm. And instead, Brock Hoffman had played in 5 games with 0 starts. T.J. Bass, a rookie, 0 starts. He played spot duty in the first 2 games. Mm-hmm. And then Chuma Edoga, who started at left tackle for Tyron Smith, he had played 28 games and had 5 career starts entering the day. So what I'm really curious about, and Mike didn't go into great detail, but in our Cowboys radio interview in the pregame that he does with Brad Sham there at the stadium, Mike admitted that he was still rolling over some things with the game plan as of Sunday morning.
Yeah.
That's something that is usually put to bed and you're putting the fine details on. And yet, because what did we not see yesterday? We didn't see like Cavante Turpin and Deuce Vaughn on the field together. We didn't see a lot of the things that we saw in the first 2 weeks. Was that because they were doing extra stuff with tight ends to help with with protection and with the run game? We saw more of Hunter Lipke helping with the run games, fullback blocking in the eye. And so it'd just be fun to have a Dr. Pepper with a little extra with Mike and the offensive coach when there are no mics or cameras around and find out how the adjustments that really took place.
Yeah. Sure. Real quick, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, there's still plenty to talk about. I know Aisha wanted to touch base on a lot of that. We're going to talk a little bit of tight end productivity, or where it has been, where it was during this game. We're going to talk about weapons not being utilized, and we're going to talk about positives, people. We're going to get some positives out of this game. Stay tuned. This is Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw, the preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. We'll be right back.
We know that juicy, cheesy, grilled-to-perfection burger sounds amazing, but it does sound like something is missing. Pepsi, baby! The yin to this burger's yang. Burgers and Pepsi go together like burgers and Pepsi. This perfect blending of flavors makes every bite of lettuce, every sesame seed on the bun, and every sip of that crisp, refreshing, ice-cold cola a journey to Foodtopia. Burgers, better with Pepsi. That's what I like.
At Jigsaw Dating, we obviously want the Cowboys to bring that 6th ring home. But to be honest, we're more focused on finding the person who will put a ring on your finger. That's why we created a dating app that reveals your face through meaningful conversation, so you can date deeper. Because it's personality that matters the most, not looks. Join Jigsaw Dating today, dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
To Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw, the preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. Check out the latest and greatest addition to tours at AT&T Stadium and the Start Frisco. Meet Jerry Jones, an interactive experience. Get a peek behind the curtain and into the fascinating life of Jerry Jones with a focus on innovative fan experience in partnership with AT&T. This interactive technology gives tour goers the opportunity to ask Mr. Jones a variety of questions. For more information and to book your tour, you can visit dallascowboys.com/tours. All right, ladies, let's go over some of these statistics from yesterday to kick things off, shall we? Dak Prescott had 249 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He completed 25 of 40 attempts. Tony Pollard led the team in rushing with 122 yards, 23 attempts, averaging 5.3 yards per carry. Let's see, on the receiving end, Michael Gallup, your reception leader for the Dallas Cowboys this week, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 92 yards. No touchdowns. The only touchdown that came from the day from Rico Dowdle had a touchdown there. He had 25 receiving yards and 21 rushing yards there. Let's start offense, then we'll work our way back to the defense in the next segment. And as always, you can always text us your questions at 817-290-3298. Okay, Aisha, you went back. I'm sure you watched some of this. You've been stewing on this. Red zone lack of production for the Dallas Cowboys. This is the third week that we're talking about it. I think the first week it was like, oh, rain game. Okay, excusable. Rain plan. Second week it was like, okay, they're just getting their feet on the ground. They're getting their footing. Third week, we're still talking about it. What is going on or not going on in the red zone that is preventing the Cowboys from capitalizing and making Brandon Aubrey really work, if you will?
Yeah, well, at least you know your kicker's all right. But one of the biggest things that I walked away from this game in particular, just curious about, because I'm trying not to use the other C word, but I'm curious about is the tight ends and the lack of usage that they're getting attacking the seams. That is something that has been a part of this offense, and I know that they said that they kept 30% of it, but the Cardinals, they run too high safety. And then so when you do that, that's your opportunity to take advantage of the middle of the field. And I really just feel like watching this game, you could tell that the Cardinals did not look at the Cowboys tight ends as real threats like that. And granted, I do think that I did see that, Jake Ferguson was able to get out in space, do some things. But I walked away concerned with the lack of usage of the middle of the field this past week. And when you talk about the red zone, I believe that Mike McCarthy said that the corners were playing high. The DBs were playing high, the Cardinals were. And that's why he decided to run in the red zone the way he did, because they had light boxes. Well, you don't have the same offensive line that you typically do to be able to, just pound the ball in there. So it's so weird because they do so well moving the ball. And then they get at the 10 or whatever. We had the penalties are a reason too, why they're getting kicked back, because they'll have some efficient plays. But then you also too, on the offensive side of the ball, very similar to what we talked about the defensive side of the ball, guys got to do their job. CeeDee Lamb, you got to finish that play. CeeDee Lamb, you got to make sure that you finish that rub route so Brandon Cooks is open. Like, there's also two execution things that are not being done. And so this passing offense in the red zone has to show a threat, because otherwise every team's going to play you straight up, and they're going to drop 6. They're dropping 6, 7 people in coverage. That tells you what they think about, number one, how you can run the ball, and number two, they're going to make you beat them. So there has to be concepts. Mike McCarthy has to create concepts that cause conflict to get guys open down there, because it's a smaller window. Your timing has to be totally on point, so your quarterback doesn't have a lot of time to redirect and stuff. And Dak said it yesterday. He said, maybe I got to use my legs. Heck yeah. Heck yeah, boss. If they're dropping 6 and 7 in coverage, that means there's grass out there. You got to make them pay. This offense has to gain the respect of defenses. Otherwise, everyone's going to play you tight. Everyone, if you don't show a vertical threat, everyone's going to make sure they stack the line. Like, it's frustrating because they move the ball so well until they get into the 10, and then there's a lid on that thing. And that just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be. Guys got to do their job. You got to knock out penalties. But I'm also asking my play caller to be a little better and, cause some conflict, be creative, get guys opportunities to get the ball. And they're doubling CD down there. I mean, I'm sorry, I know that was a ramble, but I just
No.
Those are the things that I am concerned about. It's the passing offense, because I believe that when the offensive line comes back, there will be opportunities down there for you to use a Deuce Vaughn. Rico Dowdle is a guy I know we're going to get into because I love him. I love how he's playing the game right now, but they have to earn respect from defenses to score down there, because right now everybody's playing you straight up and they're not scared of what you're doing down there at all.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Dak using his legs when they're dropping back like that. That 14-yard scramble on 3rd and 12 early in the third quarter. That was great, and that's what got him down there. But you mentioned the penalties. That was the Chuma Edoga penalty. Yep. It was the 12th one of the game, and you're in the first series of the third quarter. So that knocked him back. And that first one, they ended up having to settle for a Brandon Aubrey field goal. So, that was really tough. So, I'm sorry, the Edoga penalty was on the second series in the third quarter. Excuse me, that was the second series in the third quarter, and that was when they had the ball at just inside the 5-yard line. They needed to get to the 1, and it was incomplete to CD.
The snap was low. Dak bobbled it, caught it.
There were a couple times. That one I don't put on Hoffman, just from field level, and I'm sorry, I haven't talked to Hoffman or Dak specifically about it, but that one looked like the snap was good, and Dak took his eyes off of it for just a second. But you mentioned we were talking about a couple of the false starts earlier. That first one that was called on Terrence Steele, that went everybody on the line. The entire offense moved, and the snap was half a beat late. Yeah. So I know that 78, Terrence Steele got called, but that was one of those issues where it's a new center.
I'm looking through the penalties right now. I'm staring at them.
Oh, God.
And the only person that had multiple penalties in the game was Terrence Steele. Okay,
but again, that first one wasn't on him.
Guys. Yep. So we'll give him just one. The point is, across the board, really everybody had a penalty. Have Deron Bland, Osa, Micah, Jordan Lewis, TJ Bass, Terrence Steele, Wanye Thomas, that one.
Feel like you're Oprah and you get a penalty, and you get a penalty.
Osa,
you get a penalty.
Dante Fowler, Chuma Edoga. These are people that, Jonathan Hankins, you don't ever see get penalized. And here's the thing. Do I think this was a penalty-heavy game on both sides? Yes. More so for the Cowboys, obviously. But what gets me about it is it goes back to just playing very undisciplined football. And that's something that Mike McCarthy has always talked about when it comes to penalties, is just playing very disciplined and knowing how to be smart when you know it's a penalty-heavy game. So for me, my biggest issue is, you know what kind of game these guys are playing after you go into the locker room at halftime. At that point, you already had a handful of penalties. Okay, it's one of those games. Play extra smart. And what gets me is, for 2 weeks, we've been hearing that they're not chasing big plays and that they're not trying to force things to happen. You saw the panic mode that came into the Cowboys when they were trying to chase things and make it happen. A lot of these penalties, offsides, holding, face mask, playing out of desperation, not playing to just play and make something happen within that snap, right? It was playing to try to get ahead of where they were. They're constantly trying to play catch up, and the penalties.
Yeah, it was frustrating.
I really hope that this is the only 13 penalty game for the Cowboys this season.
Can you tell me about the Deron Bland play? Did you see? I just thought they got tripped up with each other. When I went back and rewatched it, the PI early in the game, the DPI that put them in position to go, they actually went to score there.
Yeah, second quarter defensive pass interference.
I wasn't surprised with the call. I mean,
it's penalty of the game.
Yeah, I thought it. Yeah, I know it's a tough one when you're the cornerback. That's a tough one.
He just running.
I think for me too, the most surprising one was the Michael Gallup one. When I and the Wanye Thomas.
The one on Wilson.
The one on Wanye Thomas.
Yeah.
That was let's see. Yeah. It was in the fourth quarter. And the defensive offsides, was it in the room with us? I didn't see it. That one I genuinely did not see.
It's a tough day when Bones Fossil is having a bad day, and he's mad.
And his unit is, yeah.
But again, you can't blame everything on the penalties, and we are not doing that.
Yeah.
We are not doing that.
No,
but it just points to, was it a huge factor? Obviously, it was.
But they shouldn't have to rely on a call to win a game.
You're exactly right.
Rely
You're exactly
on
right.
a defensive pass interference on Michael Gallup to win the game.
However, it does need to be called correctly.
Sure.
Because the thing is like, those plays change the game.
Called consistently.
That's fair.
Consistently.
Consistently. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's a better way to put it. It does. They do need to be consistent because, I mean, if that 2-6 is, if 2-6 getting tripped up with old dude is PI, then what the heck was that in the end zone? So that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, it wasn't. Yeah.
And so even for us as fans, it's frustrating. Or for us as people who work here as analysts, it's frustrating. But it's still just, I'm glad that I don't have to. I'm not a coach because I think it's easy for everyone to be like, they gotta stay. Like, it is, but I don't know what that feels like. I don't know what it feels like when you know, like, this guy's grabbing me. Because I went back and watched the game. The Cardinals secondary is extremely grabby, very grabby. They're scrappy. I'll give it to them. They're scrappy. But even in so, there were numerous holds that didn't get called for the Cowboys defense. I mean, and I just think the frustration built, and that played into the execution. So, yeah, they're going to have to be better. And I felt like the run game was effective when it needed to be, though.
The run game was great.
We talked about that
really
here
good.
on the show. We said the running back should have a good day.
And the thing is I think, unfortunately, when you lose this kind of loss and the last offensive drive ends with an interception, that's what's going to be talked about.
Fair.
But I don't think it's fair to let it overshadow that this game could have been a lot worse if Dak was not holding that ball like he was. I mean, for the amount of time he had to release that ball quickly, his O-line was collapsing, he was scrambling, he was using his legs a little bit more than what we've seen. Honestly, a lot of quarterbacks couldn't go through and hold the ball. Look at Daniel Jones week 1. You can't tell me when the quarterback's being bullied with that amount of pressure that there's not going to be multiple turnovers, multiple interceptions. And for Dak to only have one in this game, and I just hate that that's going to be the conversation again, should tell you something that he was playing his butt off to hold that ball and not allow it to get in the hands of the defense.
Yeah. Hey, look, whenever the Cowboys lose, especially to a team that fans and media think they should take care of, and double-digit underdogs, anytime the Cowboys lose, it is like an episode of CSI. CSI, the star. We have this dead body, this corpse, which is the loss, and then everybody's analyzing and doing the autopsy and stuff. No, it is. It is.
No, you said
it
CSI.
Is.
The song started playing in my head.
CSI, the star. That's what it is. Used to be CSI Valley Ranch till 2016.
Man.
But no. But here are the things. The Cowboys know exactly what they did wrong. Are these things fixable? Absolutely.
Say that.
Alignment, assignment, cutting out penalties, right? I mean, they know what to do.
Yeah.
And thank goodness there is a 24-hour rule in football because it works both ways.
Say that.
Yeah.
You can't get too high, but you also can't get too low. And tonight on the Cowboy Hour, we have Oso Digizua,
Okay.
the starting defensive tackle, number 97. And towards the end of the game last night, I'm thinking, oh, man, I feel bad for Osa because he's coming on the show the one time this year that it's not Victory Monday and when they gave up a lot of rushing yards. But at the same time, I think he's going to be able to put things in perspective for us.
Yeah.
And I'm really anxious to talk to him about how, you don't just put it behind you and pretend it didn't happen, right? But you learn from your successes, but especially your losses. And we'll see how they can practically apply it going into this week against the Patriots.
We were talking about this before the show, Aisha and I were. It's also not to be overlooked. The Cardinals played this like this was their Super Bowl. I mean, they put everything they had into winning this game because, again, we talked about this last week. They could not afford to be 0-3, getting ready to face the 49ers and then become 0-4 potentially. They put everything that they had into making sure this was shut down early on. And they said that throughout the week. They were talking about starting early, setting the tone early, and that's what they did. And the Cowboys just couldn't find their footing to get back into the game when they needed to. And when they would, a flag was thrown.
Well, what I think the Cardinals did was they finished. What's the word that you hear players and coaches say all the time? Finish. Finish the fight. It was the T-shirts a few years ago. And they played really well. They played really well in the first half, the first couple of weeks, and they couldn't finish it. And they totally folded in the fourth quarter against the Giants. And they weren't going to let that happen. So kudos to them because they maintained, they were consistent for the whole 4 quarters. And did they have, I think they ended up with like 8 penalties and things like something like that. I mean, there were a few mistakes. But what did they do? They protected the ball. They didn't give the ball away. So the Cowboys went from a +7 in turnover differential and with 0 giveaways and came out with a -1. So what's the number one indicator for most NFL games? Turnover differential. Cowboys didn't win a turnover differential, had a lot of mistakes, gave up big plays on defense and a lot of rushing yards, couldn't capitalize on offense in the red zone. So I'm sorry, we're not trying to be negative. That's what happened. That's the part of the autopsy results here.
Real quick, we're going to take our next break. When we come back, we're going to switch to the other side of the ball, to the defense. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to end on a positive note. So make sure to keep sending us your questions, 817-290-3298. We're going to get to those as well. This is Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw. We'll be right back.
At Jigsaw Dating, we obviously want the Cowboys to bring that 6th ring home. But to be honest, we're more focused on finding the person who will put a ring on your finger. That's why we created a dating app that reveals your face through meaningful conversation, so you can date deeper. Because it's personality that matters the most, not looks. Join Jigsaw Dating today, dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
You know that sound anywhere. It's the crisp crunch of that first nacho chip. With its perfect cheese to sour cream ratio sitting atop a layer of delicious beans, it's a sip away from perfection. That's what we're looking for. Add a delicious, refreshing Pepsi and we've achieved absolute nacho nirvana. Because while you can pile those nachos high with every spicy, cheesy, savory topping, there's no topping a cool Pepsi finish. Nachos, better with Pepsi. That's what I like.
Back to Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw, the preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. All right, ladies, let's get into this. We're going to talk defense. You can text us your questions at 817-290-3298. Keep them coming. We're going to answer them as they come in, so send us any questions you might have or any feedback, whatever your heart desires, because that's mostly what we're getting right now. All right, ladies, let's get into this. Christy, you were talking in the last block about this. The Cardinals played a good game, right? Was it an incredible game? Not by any means. Let's look at some stats here. For first downs, they had 20. The Cowboys had 26. Third downs, Arizona was 5 of 10. The Cowboys were 9 of 16. Let's see. Let's go to penalties. They had 8 penalties for 69 yards. Still not great for a winning team. That's not something you want to see for a team that really went on to win. They had 3 touchdowns. Their time of possession, interestingly enough, 25 minutes, 27 seconds. The Dallas Cowboys, 34 minutes, 33 seconds. So there you go. There's a positive. Cowboys got the time of possession there. Going for, or looking at Josh Dobbs, what he had, he was 17 of 21 of completed attempts. He had 189 passing yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. However, 55 rushing yards. That run defense was tested by Josh Dobbs as well. So, all right, ladies, the defense is not a unit that you're used to really picking apart when it comes to games like this. This was a very uncharacteristic play or showing by the defense, I would say. A lot of the things that worked well for them, obviously, just weren't happening during this game. The defense coming off of a very tough week, a very hard week after losing Trayvon Diggs. And, is this kind of the post-Trayvon injury that you're seeing? Does that have anything to do with what you saw? If Trayvon was in this game, would it have made a difference? I mean, really, that's...
he don't play.
That's a question.
He don't play inside the box. But I will say that listening to Malik Hooker and listening to a couple of the other guys, I think Jaron Curse said something really great. He said their will was just stronger than ours. And that resonated with me. I mean, the first play of the game, Micah overshoots. Mm-hmm. He's overly aggressive. They use the defense. They use the defense's aggressiveness against them. And, I mean, Micah, he runs up. He has the opportunity to make the tackle. He gets too deep. And Josh Dobbs, all the way down the field. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I will say that Malik Hooker did talk about just the communication. Like, he was saying that they did not communicate well. They were not getting the signals and the cues down, to the guys. And I think that's important. And when you do lose a guy like Trayvon Diggs, it does probably does change your communication, because he's a guy that you can be sure knows where he's supposed to be. He's supposed to know his job. But even that big play to Michael Wilson, Jay Lewis passing off nobody. Mm-hmm. Like, he literally is like, you got him. No, he does not. No, he does not. And so that's some of the miscommunication things that I think with the Trayvon Diggs out, that it's gonna take some time for them to get in sync, with some of the new gentlemen coming in. We talked about Jordan Lewis. Oh, this is his second game back. It's a lot of responsibility for him to come out. Donovan Wilson, this is his first game back. Yeah. So you saw some of that communication stuff there. But one thing that does happen in this league is when your defensive line, when your front seven doesn't look like they can stop the run, your secondary gets caught looking in the backfield because they think they got to help. And that was something that we saw this game as well. So, it makes a difference on the back end, but from the front seven point of view, guys just got to do their job. They got to do their job. It sounds easy, but a lot of guys didn't do their job. A lot of guys were doing other people's jobs. A lot of people was doing other stuff. What are you doing here? So, I think Trayvon Diggs being out makes a difference, but it shouldn't have made this much of a difference, especially when it comes to the Russian defense.
Yeah, and just the big plays given up at the worst times yesterday.
Hurt.
That was the thing, and that's why time of possession. I'm going to quote Babe Laufenberg, my Cowboys radio colleague, and he played 8 years in the NFL at quarterback. That's his least favorite statistic because it's not necessarily quantity, how long you have the ball. It's what you do when you have it.
Say that.
And the Cardinals averaged over 7.5 yards per play yesterday. And those big plays, the 45-yard touchdown run by Moore, the long one to Hollywood Brown, that was a dagger. I know his touchdown was the 2-yarder, but that one, oh my gosh, that was a huge play. The Josh Dobbs run, as you mentioned, early in the game, down the left sideline. You can't give up 7.5 yards per play. So, and meanwhile, the Cowboys, they weren't taking as many shots down the field and didn't have those big plays. So, yes, they were able to pound it with the run game. And so if I'd have told you coming into the day that the Cowboys were going to have 416 total yards of offense, over 180 rushing yards, and Tony Pollard would have over 120 yards, you would say, I bet the Cowboys win that game. They controlled it, right? Yeah. But no, because they bogged down. Yeah, they didn't capitalize in the red zone. And meanwhile, it was the Cardinals who, doing really well in the run and then made the plays down the field when they needed to. So, again, hats off to the Cardinals.
Absolutely. And something that I thought was so interesting is the last couple of weeks Dan Quinn has talked about only missing 2 tackles in the first, 4 total in the first 2 weeks of the game. That was gone. That was definitely gone during this game. It just felt like nobody knew what their job was. It felt very confusing for everybody. And, I mean, going into halftime, was there any adjustments made? Look.
Sure. Yes. They came out and they had,
they got
a good stop in the beginning of the third quarter.
And then
yes,
they deflated again,
and as the coaches always say, if you wait till halftime to make adjustments, you waiting too long. They are trying to make all that throughout the game. So
they were trying.
Yeah.
It just wasn't panning out. I mean, this is just, again, the most uncharacteristic version of this defense. And I think that's what's so confusing about it.
You're right about, there were more yards after contact for the opposing offense yesterday than there were through the first two games. There was really sure tackling the first couple of things. But like Aisha, you were saying, just at the beginning, just one misstep, just one step this way, and they're going the other way, But again, it goes back to alignment, assignment.
I love that.
But to the alignment part, though, I will say that confused me a bit, and I'm really glad we're gonna have the opportunity to ask Dan Quinn some things after here, because there were quite a few times that the Cardinals front they're running 12 personnel, 13 personnel, and the Cowboys are in the nickel, they're in the nickel, which is where they have the safeties in as linebackers, and every time the Cardinals seen that, they're running at Marquise Bell. They are the beginning of this game specifically, the Cowboys looked undersized against their combo blocks, their double teams, and things like that. And so I was wondering what the thinking was in that, because that was something that the Cardinals took advantage of. They took advantage of. And this is something we saw in, I believe, the Giants game, that first drive against the Giants, where they came out, they had a smaller lineup. Sam Williams, Chauncey Golston, also Diggy Zul. We talked about this, and they were efficient. They were efficient, like the Giants were. They were being successful because they had more size. And immediately, next time down the field, Dan Quinn makes the adjustments. Oh no, Hankins, get your tail out there, and you saw that size make a difference in the middle, and they just they attacked this. They really attacked the Cowboys smaller, like the DBs and the safeties specifically, even the DNs on the outside. They attacked the perimeter, and it was effective. And I was disappointed, because I was kind of waiting for that adjustment to be made, for those changes to be made, and it was not. It was really up and down as far as the alignments and the personnel packages.
Well, real quick, ladies, let's end on a positive note.
Yeah, my bad.
Girls Talk, Boys Talk. No, it's okay. Let's end on a positive note. We can continue to dissect this tomorrow, especially after we hear from Mike McCarthy and the coordinators here in the next 15 minutes or so. When we hear from that, we can talk about it more tomorrow. But we have a tradition here on Girls Talk, Boys Talk every Monday or Friday or, Tuesday, I guess, depending on when the game is. We give our game balls out, and just because it's a loss doesn't mean we can't do it today.
Christy.
There were some good things that we could take out of it. Some.
Who's your person?
Give a game ball.
It's nice to see Michael Gallup,
Yep.
have a really good game, and so I'm going to go with Michael Gallup for my game ball.
You go.
You go.
Dang it. I think I'm going to go with D-Law, because even when you look at the game, he was sound. Yeah. Everybody else might not have played his assignment. He did. Their assignment, he did. He was sound. His pursuit was still there, too. Because if you looked at the game, you saw they looked dejected sometimes. He didn't. He was still out there doing his job, and I know it seemed like it was important to him to still play through the adversity to be the example, and he played a good game. D-Law did.
I loved when the camera would go to him on the sideline, and you saw the
You get the death stare.
D-Law.
The death stare.
That is not something that you want to see if you're an opposing quarterback. I'm gonna go with Rico Dowdle. Because
he had a great game.
It was
Great game.
so good to see Rico be able to put on full display why he was selected to be the backup to Tony Pollard. And to me, he's had adversity in his career with injuries and not having the opportunity to show what he can do, whether it was in his control or not, injury-wise, or just the timing of coming onto the team. And now you have officially entered the Rico Dowdle era, and I'm so excited to continue to see more of him. He's physical, he's fast, he's a bullet when he finds that hole, and I'm so excited that he got his first NFL touchdown. So excited for him and to talk about it with him this week. But, ladies, that is all the time we have. I'm going to cut us short today because we have to run up to go listen to Mike McCarthy and the coordinators. But thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back tomorrow to continue to dissect this game, how the Cowboys can move forward, and then we will turn the page to all things Cowboys-Patriots coming up this weekend already for week 4 of the 2023 regular season. Ladies, thank you. Thank you. Christy, shout out. Cookies. Thank you.
From the team plane. I did not bake them.
We are going to
That's
need
Susan
these
from
extra
American
today.
Airlines. Thank you, Susan.
Shout out, Susan. We appreciate you. And we appreciate all of you guys that watch. Thank you so very much. Have a great rest of your day. Be positive. Take a breath. We'll be back here to vent it out a little bit more. This is Girls Talk Boys Talk presented by Jigsaw, the preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. See you tomorrow.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!